Hey, deserving listeners, a lot of you have been asking me to watch Welcome to Plathville and react to it, so let's get to it. I have no idea what this show is about. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's see if anything of interest comes out of my face.
We're the Plath family.
We're 11 people in the family, mom, dad, and 9 children, ranging in age from 6 to 21. We live on a 55-acre farm in a rural part of South Georgia. We have limited technology. We have limited computers.
So right away, this is my reaction, is I've done a lot of genealogy research in my family, and I have a line of my family that actually comes from that region back in the 16, 17, 1800s, and would have a lot of kids in the family. Obviously, there wasn't technology back then in the way we have today. Very isolated families, usually on a farm. I'm wondering if I'm going to get a feel for what my ancestors used to live like, in a sense. Of course, they weren't on a reality TV show, but maybe the family dynamics in terms of how this family operates, maybe there'll be some similarity to what I could imagine that family line being. They were Quakers, by the way, who lived in North Carolina. I know that's not very close to Georgia, but it's close enough. Close enough for me living in Seattle.
They don't play video games. They never have.
We love living on the farm.
Micah, throw it to me. Eli, watch out!
The other reaction I have is that this is kind of the way I grew up. I grew up before the internet. I wasn't this far out in rural parts of the Seattle area, but it was pretty isolated. We had neighbors and stuff, but this sort of stuff they're doing, playing on swings, going swimming, playing football, being outside. When I was a kid in the 70s, there wasn't much to watch on television. The only cartoons were on Saturday morning from like 8 to 10:30. You had to get all your cartoon watching done at that time, and then right after that was golf or a football game or something. There was nothing to do inside. We didn't have consoles or video games or computers or devices. Of course, y'all know this, but my point is that that's another reaction I have to this, is that I'm seeing a lot of familiar activities that I did when I was a kid, even though I didn't grow up this far out. I grew up in the suburbs that was adjacent to a lot of farms.
Mercy is 6. She's our youngest.
We have a dog named Dolly, and I like to hug him.
Cassia is 7.
She's a bundle of energy.
Yeah.
For fun, I like to climb trees, do math, and swing on the swings.
And then after that is Amber. She's 9. Amber's the quieter one. Isaac is now 13.
I'm always wondering why people want me to watch a particular show. Usually it's because there's something conflictual happening. They want me to comment on it. I am wondering about the roles in the family, how each family member fits together for the family structure, as we call it. So I'm watching out for that. The second thing is I've been on other podcasts talking about this recently, about reality TV shows and children being on these shows. Because in order for children to be on, and in order for anyone to be on one of these shows, you have to give consent, right? Like if someone came to you and said, hey, we'd like to have you on a reality TV show, they couldn't just show up and shoot you and put you on TV. They'd have to ask for your consent in order to do that. And you have to sign forms and all that kind of stuff. At least that's my understanding of the law. For children, they sometimes do have to provide consent and other times they don't. But at the very least, if you say, well, we asked the kids and the kids are totally up for it and they're totally fine for it. Okay, so we're supposed to believe that a child that's 6 years old knows what it means when they're saying, yes, I consent to being on a reality TV show. Do we believe that a 6-year-old actually has the cognitive ability and the wherewithal and the wisdom, particularly kids that grew up without a television, that they could knowingly provide consent, knowing what they're getting into? Might one of these kids be suffering silently or see the damage later down the line? We've seen that in other reality TV shows and other child actors. When they were kids, they were like, sure, I'll be on that TV show. And then 30 years later, they're writing a memoir about how damaging it was to them and how they didn't know that they could say no, or they didn't even know how to evaluate whether or not something bad was happening to them because they're too interested in pleasing other people, or they were dazzled by all the fame and meeting famous people. It does raise an ethical question and a legal question. after thinking about it, and I'm not an expert, my tentative opinion is that children actually should not be on reality TV shows for that reason. Maybe past a certain age, maybe by the time they're 16 years old, they know enough about the world that they could provide consent. But definitely a 6-year-old does not know what they're doing. And there are many examples of this, not only on reality TV shows, but more so on YouTube. There are a lot, if you don't know this, and I didn't know this until other podcasts had me on their show, and they would show me these other YouTube channels where there are whole families with kids as young as a toddler all the way up, and they're being filmed. The parents are the ones who are making money and getting fame from making these YouTube channels, and they're filming their kids. There's a reason why we don't have random kids on regular TV shows like a sitcom. It's because of these laws that are in place that say, like, if you're going to have someone on a TV show, there needs to be consent, there needs to be measures taken to make sure that that child isn't abused, they can't work too many hours, there needs to be an advocate there to make sure that they're not being mistreated because the showbiz industry might exploit certain children. Whereas in reality TV and YouTube channels, none of that is in place, from what I understand, because they're not designated as actors. They're not part of the Screen Actors Guild and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to ruin this show. I don't want to ruin these reaction videos that I'm about to make, but I do feel compelled to bring that up. And maybe we'll be able to see some data along those lines, whether the kids are more likely to later regret being on this show. Because there's a chance, at least so far, that there's really nothing about this show that would be terribly embarrassing once they're 35 and looking back. But we'll see.
Isaac's a comedian. And then there's Lydia.
Lydia's 15. She is one of the most tender-hearted people that I know.
Around here, I'm more the responsible one. I'm not bragging or anything, but that's just my personality, I guess. It's usually up to me to make sure everything gets done.
All right, so family roles. When you have a family, particularly larger ones with more siblings, you will definitely see this role-taking behavior in that each kid will carve out their own niche. And why do people do this? Well, there's a lot of theories, but the prevailing wisdom in family systems is there's two reasons. One is that, and I've always enjoyed this way of looking at things, is that every kid as they're born and as they become aware of the fact that that they have siblings that they're kind of in competition with in order to get attention and love, they look around at the siblings that are already born and they try to figure out, okay, that person, Lydia, she's the responsible one. She's the parentified one. She's the one who helps out a lot. And then the next kid, that's the rebel. So I need to be something third. I can't be the responsible one because Lydia's doing that. And as a younger sibling, I'm never going to be able to compete with that. And older kid is the rebel. Another one of my siblings is a rebel. I'm never going to be able to compete with that because I'm younger. Plus, if I choose to be a rebel, then we're both carving out half of the attention that is given to the rebel in the family. So I have to establish a third role. Now, sometimes if there are enough years in between, like 10 years, you can reinvigorate that role from a younger perspective. Like Lydia's 10-year younger sibling might be also a responsible person, but from a 5-year-old perspective. But anyway, so that's one reason why we do it, and it's a natural process, and it's been shown through some data. The thing here is that a lot of people will say, oh, birth order, right? The oldest is the responsible, the middle is the invisible one, and the young one is the cute and the baby. But research actually shows that that isn't the case. Certainly there are some families like that, and there's always someone whenever I talk about this, they're like, no, it's real. My older sibling is responsible, and I'm middle, and I'm the invisible one, and my younger sibling is totally the cute one, and I know lots of other families that are like that. Okay, great. That's probably true. I trust you on that. But when we use observational science and we actually measure personality and ask them what birth order they're in, there's no correlation, other than there seems to be a correlation between responsibility and being earlier born, particularly if you're firstborn. And of course, that makes sense. You're the oldest kid, you're taking care of the younger kids, but there are a lot of oldest kids who are not the more responsible one in the family. So, and then the other, the by opposite of responsible is creative and open-minded and more, shall I say, random in your behavior, more freer. So later born kids tend to be more along those lines, more experimental, and firstborn tend to be more traditional, conservative, and responsible. But that's just a correlation. It's not a universal thing. So the other way of looking at it is the way I was talking about it, how people will decide on different roles. Now, the other element here is as families have more health in their family, as they're more adaptable, as there's less anxiety and more ability to listen to each other and pick up on each other's cues in terms of what people need and what mood they're in, and the ability to communicate to your family members how you're feeling. As health goes up, the role rigidity goes down. So if you're in a very tense family that has a lot of conflict, the responsible one will be even more responsible. And when she wants to be less responsible or she wants someone to take care of her, she won't do that because she needs to make sure she gets the attention. Essentially what's happening is as the anxiety goes up, everyone starts worrying that they're going to miss out on the love and attention that they're getting for their role. And so they really lock in on their role because they're just like, well, I know I'm going to get some attention and love if I stay in this role. I'm the rebel. I'm the truth sayer. I'm the responsible one. I'm the cute one. I'm the forgotten one. I'm the bad one. I'm the good one. I'm the go-between. I'm the pleaser. I'm the sporto. I'm the person who's good at school. I'm the person who enmeshes with mom. I'm the person who enmeshes with dad. Whatever it is, these are the various different roles that people take, and there are thousands of others. And if I step outside that role, I'm not clear if I'm going to get love and attention. But if I stay in my role, I know I'm going to get some. I know I'm not going to get a lot because no one's getting a lot of love and attention. But I definitely know I'm going to get some, and so I'd rather hold on to that than not. And if anyone tries to encroach on that, then you push it away. The other thing is that from the outside, looking at a role, a system needs that person to be that role, the more anxiety that goes up. And so the system actually forces the person to stay in that role. So if you're the responsible one and say she's like, I just want to take a break for a couple days, and she starts giving those kinds of signals, well, if you're in a family that's high in anxiety and everyone's worried about getting their needs met, then instantly they're going to have worries that, well, if she's not the responsible one, then who's going to be the one to have an eye on dinner and have an eye on the younger kids? And then that's going to mean I'm going to have to do more work along those lines. I'm going to have to step out of my role, which means not only that it's extra work for me, but also I might have to risk not getting love and attention for the role that I've managed to establish for myself. So those are just some of the ways to look at it. But so we found our first role in terms of what we've seen that she is. I'm gonna have to make a genogram, a family tree actually, to keep track of all these people. I'm gonna have to get a notepad here.
So Lydia, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I'm not sure.
And then there's Mariah.
All right, I'm always looking for data. Of course, I have no idea. There's very little information. But what we just saw Lydia say to the question, what do you do for fun? She says, I'm not sure. Who knows? It's just a tiny, tiny, tiny little yellow flag of an indication of parentification, meaning that she doesn't know what she wants. And because she, from an early age, was parentified, meaning she was pressured to be more responsible, or she learned the only way for me to get love and attention is to be very responsible. And in doing so, sacrificed her ability as a child to learn who she is and explore those kinds of feelings, and thus doesn't really know who she is and what she wants, and doesn't know how to have fun, which 16-year-olds, we would hope, would know how to do. Who knows? Maybe she just didn't have anything off the top of her head. But if I'm going to use this as a jumping off point to educate about family systems and development, that's one thing I'll say to that.
Hey.
She's 16.
Mariah is... Go ahead.
Mariah can be opinionated.
Okay, who knows? But from the way they describe that, it sounds to me like she is the rebel in the family, the truth teller, and maybe the scapegoat. So let's watch for that.
I've always been really different than the rest of my family. Nothing against my parents. Like, I love my parents, but...
Okay, if you are the scapegoat or the rebel or the truth sayer, usually those are all one role, then you often will feel like you're the outsider. You often will feel like, yeah, I'm definitely different than my siblings. There's something different about my personality. Now, let me talk about personality. So there are dispositional elements. I talked earlier about how your role in the family is developed by watching what came before you and also the general flexibility and health of the family. Well, another part of it is disposition. Some kids are kind of born opinionated. If you've ever raised toddlers, now, of course, when they're 6 months old, they're not opinionated verbally, but you'll definitely see patterns that will develop into behavioral traits as a younger child. There can certainly be 2.5-year-olds who are quote unquote opinionated. Now, it's in a 2.5-year-old sort of way, but often when you look at that behavior in a 2-year-old, you can trace back a disposition that was seemingly a little bit present when they were even 6 months old. And so sometimes your role is determined by that as well. That as you enter the family pays attention to the kind of disposition you have and will start to accentuate that a little bit or maybe even work against it. So maybe she was born with a little bit more, I don't know, opposition, maybe a little bit more questions, maybe she's more skeptical. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out more information.
I don't agree with everything they say and think.
I love freedom. And I like being crazy. I love.
Now, we haven't heard any scapegoating yet. The parents seemed a little bit anxious about describing her. I imagine if they were being more truthful that they would say she was difficult. Who knows? But they said that she was opinionated. She's saying that she doesn't always agree with everything that's happening. That points to the possibility that the other kids do often agree. And she's like, I'm not like my siblings in that I will speak my mind. I will disagree. She says she likes her freedom. So these are very much in line with the rebels of the family, or the people who will say no and are expected to push back. Now, there's nothing wrong with those roles. There's nothing wrong with a family encouraging that. There's nothing wrong with a person volunteering for that role. The only problem is if it interferes with her and other people getting their needs met. Like I said before, everyone sort of looks at the siblings before them and says, okay, what can I be? I suspect that her older siblings, I think there are 2 more that are older than her, were not the rebels in the family. And so when she was 2 years old, she looked, oh, you know what? No one's the rebel. No one opposes. No one speaks their mind. So that's what I'll do, and that's the way I'll get my love and attention. So it's only a problem if it becomes rigid. It's the only way they can get their love and attention, or it gets so exaggerated that she ends up being rejected and feels rejected. We hear a little bit of a hint of that in that she says she feels different from the other people. So I would worry that maybe she feels like she has been rejected because she is willing to say no to things, or that she's difficult and she says no to too many things, which both can be true in families. But I don't have any data. Let's continue watching.
Mariah's preoccupied with listening to music and doing her makeup. Yeah.
Hosanna and Lydia are more like the perfect ones.
She's wired differently.
It's not so much rebellion. It's more, if you say I can't, I will do it just to prove that I can.
Okay, so she is the rebel. Now, you hear the way the mom is describing it. She is saying, well, it's not rebellion. It's just that whenever we tell her to do anything, she always rebels against it because she can. Because she just wants to rebel. So it's not like rebellion. It's just that she rebels against everything. So it's interesting that I think it sounds like the mom and maybe the dad too are struggling with the reality of it. And they want to paint it in a positive way, but are having a hard time. So it sounds like this might be actually an issue, and maybe why you wanted me to watch the show. You also heard her say that her sisters are the perfect ones. And she wasn't saying that in a nice tone. She wasn't saying, oh, my other sisters, they're great. No, she's saying my sisters are the perfect ones. They're the pleasers. They don't have a personality. They don't even know who they are. They're weak. I'm strong. Now, again, there's nothing wrong, especially with teenagers, especially in a situation like this. There's going to be a lot of rivalry between siblings. Now, the other thing I'll say is the more health you have in a family, the lower the rivalry. There's always a little bit of rivalry, particularly if you're close in age. But when everyone is getting their needs met, we don't need to fight with our siblings, and we don't need to put them down to elevate us. But if you lower the love and you lower the amount of health in a family, then you're looking at a situation where people are going to start fighting with each other to make sure they can get a little bit of love and attention from their parents. It works against them, of course, because then the parents don't like you because you're causing problems, and it just sort of cascades from there. But anyway, let's continue watching.
It's kind of the joke in the family. Hosanna's almost perfect. Hosanna had a college that offered a scholarship for her to do music. But what does she need college for? She's learning more by doing right now than she ever would sitting behind a desk in a college.
All right. I'm going to note, I have a genogram here that I'm working on. And so Hosanna is quote unquote perfect or almost perfect. Now, what does that mean? Terrible penmanship. That might not bother the other siblings, but it might. The label of almost perfect. There are a lot of different ways to point to that. Like you could say, she's a great kid. She is very good at things that she tries. It's different than saying almost perfect, right? Now, again, if all the other kids are getting their love and attention needs met, then it's probably just a tiny little bit of a sting to the rest of the kids, or maybe not at all. Maybe they all celebrate in how wonderful she is. But if you have not enough love and attention. The other factor here is that the more kids you have, sometimes the harder it is to give all the kids the love and attention that they need. It's not always the case for sure. And certainly you can get your love and attention needs met by your siblings as well. But there are cases that I've seen where more kids meant less love for each child. And I don't know if that's the situation here. I have no evidence of that. Let's continue watching.
Olivia and I decided to get married on my parents' farm. I just thought it was a good way to say goodbye to where I grew up. And she was just the most beautiful sight ever in her little dress.
I will say right from the start, there seems to be a certain wholesomeness and honesty from the kids. Maybe that's the way they were raised. It seems like that's very likely. It could also be a result of not watching television, not being able to see television, not going on the internet, that you're just less self-conscious. It's quite possible, and there's a lot of research in this area, that the more complicated children's lives become, the more screens, the more social media, the more television, the less time they spend with their family, for that matter, the more self-conscious they are. And thus, on a reality TV show, the more protected they are, the more they act like someone other than themselves. Who knows? But there seems to be a delightful genuineness from this family.
You're in love.
Ethan, you may kiss your bride.
That kiss. They're so sweet. You can tell they practiced it.
Again, as I said, rebel, truth-sayer. So she's the playful one, the one who feels free to point out things that other people might be a little shy to point out. Definitely living up to her typical role presentation. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which I watched this TV show I've never seen before, Welcome to Plathville. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it. Is it Plathville or Plathville? I don't know. And please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.